morning again from Community Health Screen UK. I am Dr. Mekella Mehmet Yesil, and on the programme this morning I have Ryannah Benjamin, who's a trained clinical nurse, midwife, and she's also a specialist in autism. Welcome to the show, Ryannah.
Thank you for having me.
Before we touch base with autism, I'd like Ryannah to explain a little bit about her background, if that's okay with you, Ryannah?
That's fine. So I studied midwifery in the past. I did that for 5 years, and then I later went on to studying working with autistic children. So I currently work in a school for children with autism, and they vary. So they're all like different ends of the spectrum. Some of them are high functioning, some of them are low functioning, and some of them are verbal, some of them are non-verbal, so it just varies basically.
Okay. What is autism? So basically, is it something we're born with? Is it something we develop later on? What is it? Because I'm hearing so many things. Obviously, my background is different, but obviously you work with neurodivergent children.
Yes.
So can you elaborate a little bit about the subject for us?
So autism is something that you're born with. We don't know why it happens. We don't know how it happens, but it's a neurological delay in development in the brain basically. So it basically can prevent you from being able to speak, being able to like communicate. It prevents you from it gives you like
social skills.
Yeah. So it like kind of minimises your social skills. So
I remember a few years ago, many years ago actually, I was doing an interview with a professor, and he was talking about a specific gene called the Spanx gene, and that could be responsible for it.
Yeah.
But usually they say one of the parents could have a background of autism perhaps, but obviously 20, 30 years ago nobody knew anything about anybody who was neurodivergent, Asperger's. So it's all coming to light now, and some people say, it's to do with vaccines, which we know that's not the case. Yes. It's obviously something we're born with. Yes. Can you put some light on that perhaps for us?
So autism is a very touchy subject because there has been talks about people like parents being born with also being autistic. Again, we don't know because autism has been around for so long and up to now they still
up until the 2000s. We didn't know. I mean, in my era, when I was growing up in class, we didn't have anybody who was autistic or high functioning. We just thought that person was different.
Exactly.
So they just sat in the class, they daydreamed, they didn't communicate, or they didn't talk, or they weren't getting the help that they needed.
Exactly.
Obviously now, in classrooms, we have special educational needs, we have Senko, we have other people in the classroom who can help that child adapt. But from previous experience of seeing newborns and obviously seeing them into the early sort of like stages of their life, they don't get diagnosed until a certain age.
So they don't get diagnosed until they're about 3.
Okay.
Only because it's kind of like it's hard to kind of gauge where they're at developmentally because you don't want to kind of compare them to other children that may be classed normal. So they kind of do delay it a little bit. I think that they should kind of maybe touch on it on their 2-year-old check because the child will have
That's very important actually. Why is that? Why is it they're not doing that?
I don't know. There's kind of like, it's more of like a tick box, so they kind of have to do certain things according to what the government and the NHS are saying that they have to look out for, and autism unfortunately is not on. It's not on.
So it's not an illness, it's a condition.
It is a neurological disorder basically.
Okay. So it just means that the child will still be normal in many aspects, but will socially and
emotionally
they'll behave differently.
Yes, they will behave differently.
What sort of things do we need to look out for? Like a young mother has a child, brings it up to the age of 2, starts seeing some trends. What sort of things do we need to look out for?
So early signs of autism can be things like stimming, flapping, not having very good eye contact, not responding to their names, doing things repeatedly. So maybe they might take things out of the cupboard and repeatedly line them up and put them back, take them out, line them up, put them back. So it's just a constant repetitive actions. They may do things like not wanting to have certain things on their hands because it may be like
a sensory thing.
Yes. It's like an over-stimulating sensory sensation that they don't enjoy, or they might put certain things in their mouth that kind of heightens their sensory needs. So but early stages are typically things like not responding to their name, flapping, stimming, not very, very little to no eye contact.
Yeah. Does a child sort of have any physical sort of developmental issues with autism as well? I mean, you talked about stimming and not giving eye contact.
Yes.
Is there any other physical aspects we need to address or to be made aware of so parents or caregivers can look out for?
Not necessarily. I mean, from my own personal experience, I have a niece who's autistic and she's now 10.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't walk, she wasn't hitting her milestones at the typical stage she was supposed to. She walked quite late, just before her second birthday, and normally children will start to walk as early as 9 months.
Okay.
Or it may be as late as 2, or they may never walk.
So developmental things like physical, like walking.
Yes.
Okay.
Feeding herself, it may be a struggle, using the toilet, so these are all things that you kind of have to assist them with. But then there are other children who are on the higher end of the spectrum who are very independent and they are able to do all these things independently, and they kind of do. From my experience at nursery, we had a little boy who, he was 2 years old, he was able to write his name, he was able to respond.
At 2 years old?
At 2 years old.
So it's very high functioning.
He was extremely high functioning. Everybody would say, he's so smart, and it can kind of be mistaken for autism. Like you say, oh, the child is so smart, because people think, oh, because they have autism, they shouldn't be able to do all these things, they shouldn't be able to.
So he was more high functioning.
He was more high functioning, and there are like many different, it is a spectrum, as I said before, so it's,
Yeah, I understand. Okay. So if the child sees the health visitor or the social worker at 2 years old, is there certain milestones that child should be hitting, like you said about the walking, talking, babbling, or doing things independently? Should there be things that parents can look out for example?
So before the 2-year-old check, you you will get like a red book, that we all typically get, and it has milestones in it that you as a mother can kind of look out for. Once they get to nursery and they get to 2 years old, they will have a mandatory 2-year-old check, and basically they just look up for things like how they respond to certain activities. Are they able to do these activities? It's
independently or with their peers?
Independently. Yeah, it is normally independently. They may assess them with their peers, but it is mainly an independent observation.
I found that since coming out of like the pandemic and the lockdown, some of the children who were born during the pandemic have, unfortunately, because they haven't had the social interaction with grandparents, family members and stuff, they've not been able to hit some of those milestones, and this is why some of the delays happened with in regards to the NHS or social workers or health visitors helping parents or caregivers sort of like give them the advice that they need, because you see it so much on social media as well, and like parents sort of coming to me or to yourself, or my child's not doing this or they're not doing that, because of what's happened. Do you think that because of the pandemic or because of not having this social interaction with our children, that's compensated a little bit for them being the way that they are?
100%. Yes, because they've missed out on being able to have that social interaction with the children. They've missed out on being able to speak to other children and play with other children and learn from their peers.
So interaction.
Because they've been in the house for so long, they kind of miss out on these opportunities.
So they've been imprisoned to the environment,
unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a shame, really. A child with autism, obviously, until they get the diagnosis, we said about the spinning and the stimmering, the flapping of the hands. Is there anything else that a parent can look out for other than that before they get a diagnosis, before they consult a specialist medical team or anything?
So the ones that I named already are the main ones that you will look out for. Yeah, obviously you will get to know your child individually, and obviously you'll be able to know kind of the child's ability and what they can do and what they can't do and stuff like that. So if you do have any concerns, it might be a very minor concern. Always just go and see somebody. Like, that's what they're there for.
Okay,
they're there to help you.
Are these sort of children put into special placements or special schools, or do they go to mainstream schools? Do they get assistance?
So unfortunately, some of them do come from, a lot of children do come from mainstream schools, and because the school is not able to facilitate, they don't have the funding, whatever the case would be, they are kind of left to the wayside, unfortunately, and they're not really given the opportunity. They're not really able to, they're not able to develop the way that they're supposed to, because they're not the schools don't have the resources to be able to.
Is that the mainstream schools?
That is in mainstream.
But there is specialist schools for the low end spectrum. Is that correct?
There are schools that the children can go to, and they are specialist schools, and they accommodate for the children needs 100%. They have pastoral teams, they have OT, like the occupational therapists, all these different people to help the children develop
with their physical, emotional, and psychological needs. Oh, that's good to know. So we've already touched on the early signs, and we spoke about the spinning and everything else. What difficulties do these children experience being in a normal, like mainstream school, for example? I mean, what sort of things will they find it hard to do?
So in a mainstream school, as you can imagine, there's a class of 30 children, and when you're autistic, you kind of want to be, a lot of children want to be isolated, and they get overstimulated by light, by noise. So being in a class with so many children and adults and stuff like that, it can be very overwhelming for them. So they kind of just go into lockdown mode, and they kind of just shut off altogether. But once they do progress and become go to a facility where it helps them, it relaxes them. They have sensory rooms, we have soft play rooms where they're able to kind of express their emotions within their own units, basically.
What would you suggest is a good thing to have for parents who have early toddlers who've just come out of being a baby, they're going into 2-3 years old? What other communication barriers will that child and that parent experience? I mean, is there anything we can help that mother and child sort of communicate or bond or do something better perhaps? I mean, is there sort of sensory tools that a parent can use?
So there are plenty of sensory tools out there. It's just literally a case of just Googling different sensory toys if that's what the child needs, then
I mean, how are you going to know if that child wants food, if that child wants to sleep, if the child needs to put his coat or shoes on? How do we express to that child that's neurodivergent and can't express themselves? Do we have something that we can show them?
So we have things like PECs.
We
have things like floorboards, which they can point to and kind of form 3 words, 3-part sentences. They have talk pads, which is basically just like an iPad, and they can just press what they want, basically. So there are different ways of them communicating. Some children will just take you to what they want, or they will bring what they want to you. So they all have different ways.
What about sign language? Is that something that they can learn?
Sign language is something you can learn as a child and also as a parent. It's not really used that much in the school I work in. We do something called it's not sign language, it's more like Makaton. Yeah, so every morning we'll have Makaton meetings where we're able to kind of learn different words to help the children, and in order to help the children communicate, especially when they're non-verbal, we do encourage them to use Makaton just for basic things, for very basic things.
A lot of parents will be sitting here and asking, will my child grow out of autism? Okay, no. So it's something they're going to have to live with and just embrace and
adjust. And
okay. And is there help out there for these parents?
There is help out there.
Organisations, perhaps?
There are organisations. There's something called CAMS, which basically help with the mental health aspects of children that suffer with autism. Not just autism, they help children that have just ordinary mental health issues, or that may just suffer from anxiety or social anxiety. So CAMS is out there. As I said, within schools there are pastoral teams, there are different people that can help you, and they will offer you any resources that they have, any help that's out there. You can access it.
Okay. And is there any sort of I know we talked about educational needs and stuff like that. For a parent of an autistic child or an adult now even, I mean, what help government funded things perhaps are out there, or anything that they can turn to, or websites that they can look for help?
So you would have to find these things from the borough. But it is a case, unfortunately, it is a case of just doing our own research, because there isn't a lot of things out there for, advertised about autistic children. So that there are things that you kind of have to do your own research on and dive into yourself in order to get the help specified for your child or children.
Yeah. Do you think later on, as these children progress later on in life, do you think they'll be able to go on and leave normal adult lives.
100%.
They will.
Yeah, that doesn't go for all autistic children, but there are like majority that are able to live independently. They are able to do things by themselves. They are able to make their beds, make a cup of tea, cook a simple meal, go out into the community by themselves, maybe go shopping and come back. These things are possible. Just because you're autistic, it doesn't mean that you're autistic. You can 100% do these things. It just takes a lot longer to be able to gauge these skills, but it can be done.
Okay. And is there anything, we're just coming up to the end of the programme now, is there anything you, as somebody that helps parents and children, is there any information or advice you can sort of like reflect upon whilst we finish the end of the show?
So one thing I would say is just to remember that you're not alone. There are resources out there. There are people that can help you. There are things that people that you can speak to. It's just about asking questions. Just ask. If you're unsure about anything, just ask questions, and they will be able to maybe or maybe not give you the answers. But I think you would have to do quite a bit of research yourself.
And it's important to show love
100%.
and affection to that child in that environment, just to show to the child that that child's not alone. We understand that they're neurodivergent, and obviously that child's going to grow up to be in an environment where they're going to get all the support and everything that they need. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Ryannah. Thank you very much.